Today, we are talking my favorite filmmaker in the business. What is up, flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. So as you guys know, and as I just revealed in my intro, Denis Villeneuve is my favorite filmmaker working right now. I believe he is top-notch in pretty much every category, and I love talking about him. I also love learning how to pronounce his name right. I went back and forth on so many different things, and I just looked it up, and I think it's Denis Villeneuve. I think. So I love talking directors in general because to the outside world, maybe they're not as important as the big name actor, or if they're not a recognizable name to the general audience, well, then it doesn't really matter who's directing the movie. But I truly believe that the director or the directors involved are the most important aspect of any movie, and obviously the recognizable names right now, like a Steven Spielberg, like a Quentin Tarantino, like a Christopher Nolan, they are recognizable for a reason. But I'm here to talk about a filmmaker that I believe should be more recognized with the general audience, a filmmaker that has brought us some of the most incredible movies over the last couple of years, in my opinion, and one who is not done yet because obviously my most anticipated movie, hopefully still coming out this year, is Dune. I cannot wait to see what he does with this, but right now we're reflecting on the past, the movies that have come prior to Dune. I'm going to be placing his films on specific tiers as well as ranking them at the end of the video. Now, obviously, y'all know how I feel about some of these. It's going to be pretty predictable where some of these are going to go, but other films that maybe I just watched for the first time and logged on Letterboxd, you may not know where I'm going with it. So let's get right into it and start with the movie that I had to go back, seek out, rent just to see, and that is Polytechnique. Now, this was a very unexpected film coming from Denis. It's unlike anything I had seen in his filmography prior. It came out in 2009. It's a dramatization of the Montreal Massacre in 1989, where several female engineering students were murdered by an unstable misogynist. Now, Canadian actor Maxime Gaudette plays the killer here. He also pops up in another film we're going to talk about later, so he has a pretty good relationship established with Denis, but his performance and just kind of digging into the mentality that he has when he commits these atrocious murders is pretty incredible. Obviously, you're getting to know who the killer is, why he does what he does. It's not justified in any way, but you kind of understand the psyche, what's going on behind the scenes there. It's almost what people were fearing for when Joker came out. It's like, I don't want to feel bad for Joker. Well, the film it doesn't push you in that direction, but it just gives you an idea of why he feels what he's doing is the right thing to do. And then you get a look at the other side of the story, and it's just a really interesting concept. The film is also obviously in black and white, so a very different movie from what we expect, and I really appreciated the filmmaking. Now, for a film that is only an hour and 17 minutes, the one critique that I have, and something that I don't see as an issue in most of the other films that we're talking about, is the pacing. It moves a bit slower than what I think the source material calls for here, and that may not engage audiences as much as they should be engaged because of the story that he's recreating on screen. It's also extremely violent. And you watch a movie like Prisoners and you're like, oh man, this is tragic. But this is, in my opinion, just as tragic as a film like Prisoners, and another movie we're going to get into here in just a second. But I think at the end of the day, I'm still going to place it on the good tier because it doesn't necessarily live up to the other films that he's directed, but it's still pushing that great tier. Really good job on his part. Then we have Blade Runner 2049, a film that some see as overrated. That's absolutely okay. Not that I think the original Blade Runner is overrated per se, but I don't like it as much as everyone else. I've heard the word masterpiece thrown around. I just don't see that. I would put that much more in this movie's court because I truly believe Blade Runner 2049 is an all-time sci-fi film, at least in the vein of a slower, more poetic, much more of a character study sci-fi movie. It's obviously difficult to compare this to something like a Star Wars or more action-packed sci-fi movies than maybe we get nowadays. But Blade Runner 2049, what it did for me, and allowing me to finally, I always appreciated it, but truly appreciate the world that Ridley Scott gave us way back when, and get into the lore of these characters. to be this impressed with Harrison Ford's performance, I just didn't expect it. Not that he didn't do a good job in Star Wars. I loved him coming back as Han, obviously. But you look at something like Indiana Jones, and that fourth film just didn't capture the magic. I'm like, something is missing from Harrison's performance. And I didn't feel that at all in this movie. I thought Harrison was firing on all cylinders, but it's Ryan Gosling. I mean, Gosling's performance, maybe it's a bit more reserved and calmed down as some would like, but you have to look at the character that he's playing, and then you look at what his character goes through, finally realizing who he actually is, right? Until that is stripped away from him, not even knowing what he has to live for, and then finally realizing his purpose for doing what he is doing. And then Harrison Ford's story arc. I mean, it's an incredible emotional ride. Sure, for some, and these are valid criticisms, it's a bit slow moving. We talked about the pacing before. This is a film with slower pacing, but I think it's warranted with the story that they're telling. You combine that and how emotional I was about these characters, the performances, Ana de Armas, Sylvia Hoeks, and then the visuals, the score, everything on a technical. It is a technical masterpiece, absolutely. If you wanted to argue narratively, I would completely understand. But for me, it worked narratively, it worked technically, and it is one of my favorite sci-fi movies, not just of the decade, but all time. So now we come to one of the more divisive movies from Denis. In 2013, he brought us Prisoners and Enemy. Enemy, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. It's a very, I'll say, strange film, right? It's unlike anything I had ever seen. And it's one that I've watched multiple times because I feel like it's a movie that warrants multiple watches. Not just because, if you watch it again and again, you'll really enjoy it, you'll start to catch on to things, but because I just want to understand what the heck is going on. But basically what you have here is a man who seeks out his lookalike after spotting him in a movie. So he thinks in his brain that there is someone that looks exactly like him. So you get this web of stories with Adam, his relationships, the ups and downs in his life, what's happening on this side, and then Anthony exploring what goes on with him as a character and finding out who he actually is. Those two storylines converge and create, in my opinion, a really fascinating story. Now, at first, and I won't lie to you, the first time I watched this, I just wasn't all there on it. I'm like, this is just a strange film. And the way that it ends, and you all know that final scene, first time, and I truly believe everyone's going to feel that way. But what I love about this movie is the dialogue, the script, the motivations behind each character, and realizing that maybe the life that you are living is not the life that you crave. And then you get into the psyche of someone and how that anger inside of them builds up so much. And I watched an interview with Denis recently where he talked about Enemy and the fact that he wanted to showcase that rage and that anger and that jealousy. And you all know where the stories go to towards the end in that third act. And when those things finally converge, that's when it begins to really start resonating with certain audience members. Once again, this movie is very divisive. I know some people that absolutely hate this film. They don't understand the ending. And listen, I'm not claiming to completely understand how this film resolves itself, but I love a movie that makes you think, and I love a movie that studies a character so deeply and in depth in the way that this film does. And this doesn't just do that for Adam, it does it for Anthony as well, both being played by Jake Gyllenhaal. And Jake's performance with Denis in general, I mean, is phenomenal, but in Enemy alone, A24 got a good one, in my opinion. Actually, they got a great one with Enemy, and I believe if you've only seen this once, you didn't love it, maybe give it another chance, but not everyone's going to have it up there, and I understand that. So I was calling this next movie Incendies, and then I realized it was French, so that's not how you say it. Incendies? Incendies. Incendies? Is it just no S?
Incendie.
Okay. We'll just say it translates to fire. And I had so many people tell me, Austin, you claim to be a big fan of his and you haven't seen one of his marquee films. And I'm like, okay, well, if it's that good. So I looked into it. I found it. I finally sat down to watch it. And oh my goodness. Right? Keep in mind, I've only seen this movie once. So maybe it's not going to be all-time for me just yet, because these other movies that are going to end up on the all-time tier, I've seen multiple times. But already, after one viewing, I have to put this film on the awesome tier. What a beautiful story. Oh my goodness. First of all, thank you for recommending this film. Second of all, I knew I had to watch it eventually because I love this director so much. What a beautiful movie. My goodness. So basically you have twins who journey to the Middle East. They discover their family history, and they're also trying to fulfill their mother's last wishes. And sure, you're exploring the aftermath of a war. Sure, this is a very dramatic and thrilling movie, but it's almost a mystery. Because what they're trying to uncover is something that I don't want to dive into because I know not everyone's seen this film, but is the most tragic and heartbreaking and emotional story you may find in his resume. In these other movies, I mean, Prisoners is such an emotional movie, Polytechnique, but this may take the cake. I mean, I was just overwhelmed with emotion. And I won't lie to you, there were points in the story when it slowed down to a point, I'm just like, I don't know if I'm all there on the pacing. There were moments where I was slightly confused as to what was happening because we're flashing back and forth through time. We're getting the story of their mother, but in the midst of that, we're getting the story of them finally discovering what she actually intended on them finding out, and it all comes together in that final scene, or in the final couple of scenes, in the final few moments. I mean, some of the best filmmaking I've seen in quite some time, and when that impactful moment finally hits, and you all know what I'm talking about, you're just overwhelmed, and this is one of the first films in a long time, at home, remember, not in a theater, that I just sat and watched through all of the credits, didn't say a word, didn't look at my phone, I just sat on the couch. And that's the sign of an awesome film, in my opinion. Next up, we've mentioned it, here we are, Prisoners, starring Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, an abundance of incredible talent. You have Keller Dover, whose daughter and her friend go missing, so he takes matters into his own hands as the police pursue multiple leads and the pressure mounts. I don't know how I didn't mention Paul Dano, and I love the performances in this film. Possibly the best acting showcase of any Denis movie, and I truly believe this is one of the most emotional movies I've ever watched. One, because I have not dealt with similar issues, obviously, but I used to make videos for something called Hope's Place, and they deal with children who have went through different traumas in their lives, and not necessarily a child that has been taken, but you can only imagine what some of these kids go through when they get taken, right? So this has almost a soft spot in my heart watching this movie, and not to say that's a good soft spot. It is a very emotional soft spot. It's hard to watch this film, to be honest with you. It's really tough to see what Jackman's character has to go through. And sure, sometimes he obviously goes overboard, but that's that anger deep down inside that I was talking about with Enemy. It's showcased, I think, even stronger in this movie, and his relationship with his wife becomes a bit unstable because she is handling this, I think, maybe not as well as he is in a way, because what he does, what he ends up doing is really crazy, but you understand, right? You understand his mentality of, I just want to find out what happened to my daughter. So it's the uncovering of this case, it's the mystery of it all, and once Denis does Dune, I'd like to see him go back to, not his roots necessarily, but go back to a film like this where you get a showcase of incredible acting and just a really dramatic and thrilling story, but one that feels super grounded like Prisoners does, and one that I think just has the perfect pacing, the perfect finality for me. Now, for some, they're going to watch that final scene and be like, why did it end like that? I want to know. But I love when a movie can just engross you and then leave you wanting more. And that small moment at the end, I don't want to say what it is, just gets me every time, man. Prisoners does it. It does it right. It is an all-timer for me. I'll rank it at the end, obviously, but I can't get enough of this. I think one of the most underrated movies of 2013. Then we have Sicario. So an idealistic FBI agent is enlisted by a government task force to aid in the escalating war against drugs at the border area between the United States and Mexico. Benicio del Toro, John Bernthal, Josh Brolin, Emily Blunt. Oh my goodness, another spectacular effort on everyone's part. It's a film that handles crime and the impact of that crime and a modern look into the cartel and what this war is actually doing behind the scenes, because things like this, and that is what I love about the realism from his films. Obviously, he does great sci-fi, and I can't wait to see what he does there. But movies like this that give you an insight, but an incredible insight into a world that we're unfamiliar with, at least most of us, I believe. Emily Blunt. Emily Blunt is so good in this movie, and her relationship, whether it's a rocky relationship with Josh Brolin, a strange relationship with Benicio del Toro, and then an early Daniel Kaluuya appearing, and that friendship that you have there that's established. And I just love the way this film progresses. It is one of the slower paced movies that at first I wasn't all the way there on, but the more I watch it, the more I can appreciate the pacing. And that reason is why, for me, it goes on the awesome tier instead of the all-time tier. There were a couple of things that I think he could have tweaked to make this an all-time movie for me. But once again, a director with this many all-time movies, meaning one of my favorite movies of all time, it's ridiculous. And if he would have had another one on there, just give him all the trophies. But I love how he combines genres here. This is a war-centric, dramatic thriller with action, crime. It's a mystery. It has everything you could possibly want. And Sicario, if you're interested in something like this, if you love the world of, say, a Narcos, and you've never seen Sicario, it's great. There was also a sequel. I often forget about that because it does not have the same director. It was solid, but if I were to put it on a tier, it wouldn't be on one of the top ones. Then we have Arrival. Let's get this out of the way, place it on the tier that it belongs for me, and talk about another movie showcasing phenomenal performances. It's Denis tackling sci-fi for the first time, and oh my goodness, this did get a Best Picture nomination. Thank goodness. But I truly believe this is one of the smartest, maybe the smartest sci-fi original movie that I've ever seen, and one of the most emotional experiences I've ever had. So you have Amy Adams, who plays a linguist, and she works with the military to communicate with alien life forms after 12 mysterious spacecrafts appear around the world. And just the start of this movie, you're on the edge of your seat. I love the scene where she's teaching and everyone is walking out of the college fearing for their lives because you hear the horns going off in the background, you see the military flying over, and you know that there is life out there. There is life beyond what we know, and that's scary in itself, but he doesn't handle this in a very blockbuster-ish way. There isn't the epic music playing in the background and you have people giving speeches everywhere, and I love a film like that, but this is just real. It's ominous. It's creepy. And you find out later on that what else we see at the beginning with Amy Adams' character and her daughter means more than maybe the movie is letting on to, and that's where it got me. Right, you have Louise, everything that she goes through with Ian. Jeremy Renner is really good, by the way, as well as Forrest Whitaker. You have the interactions with the aliens the first time that you see them, and maybe the designs aren't the best alien designs I've ever seen, but it's not even about that. It's about the experiences behind the scenes and the interactions with different countries and how people start to turn on each other because maybe the belief just isn't there. And obviously, what's happening with Louise and what you find out at the end is just an unexpected layer that the more I watch the movie, and this is an ongoing theme with Denis movies, the more I appreciate that element. And then you get the relationship with her daughter, and that reveal, it's just nonstop goodness as you go. And it's a film that gets me emotional every time I watch it. I think the incorporation of the music at the end has been played in plenty of other films, but that was great. But the overall score, Johan Johansson, is slowly becoming one of my favorite scores of all time. Rest in peace. I mean, we lost him way too soon. He was becoming a composer that I had my eye on, but this score resonates with me so much. And everything about this movie, on a technical level, it's brilliant. On an acting level, it's brilliant. It's one of those films that has slowly moved up every list I have it in. All right, so it's finally time to rank these films. Let's take a look at this list. Actually, before I submit my ranking, there's one more movie that we have to talk about, and that is Maelstrom. Austin, a movie on the okay tier. What's going on here? Okay, so Denis actually directed one movie in 1998, one movie in 2000, both extremely hard to find. I wanted to watch at least one of these. These are films that aren't often talked about because sometimes people completely overlook them. I had to seek out Maelstrom. I finally found it via Netflix DVD service, and that's the only way I think you can watch it. I had a Barnes & Noble order, but it went away. And Maelstrom was just completely different than anything he has ever done. You have a woman who plunges her car into a river. Then she encounters a man who helps her come to terms with her life. A life that seems perfect on the outside. She co-owns a chain of boutiques in Quebec with her brother, and her father is a famous entrepreneur. But then it slowly begins to fall apart. This leads to substance abuse, and this entire story is told by a fish who's about to be decapitated. It's a strange movie. And it didn't all come together in the way that his other films do. You can tell he's a young filmmaker at this point. The story wasn't all there for me. I wasn't as interested in this main character. I do feel like some like this movie a bit more than me, but I just feel a few amateur elements that don't pop up in his other films. I understand why people overlook Maelstrom. It wasn't even on this tier list. I had to add it myself. It was not on the template. And I can somewhat see why, but I still think it's an okay movie, and who knows, maybe the more I watch it, maybe the more I believe it's good. I need to watch it now, though, because I have to send the DVD back. So I actually think it looks really good in order of my least favorite to my most favorite until you get to that all-time tier. I have to move Blade Runner below Arrival and Prisoners below that. If you saw my favorite movies of all time list, you know that's the order, but Arrival is my favorite Denis Villeneuve movie of all time. Top 3, Prisoners, Blade Runner 2049, Arrival. But everything behind those films, they are slowly creeping up. And his filmography all around, I appreciate. So that's it, guys. So sorry about the length of this video, but I love Denis Villeneuve as a director. He is one of my favorites of all time. So I'd love for you guys to comment your favorite movie if you like this tier list and you want to see more director-centric tier lists. Leave that thumbs up button. We will do more. Appreciate you for watching. I'll see you soon.